to help us talk through this topic in more detail, and I do really hope to get some of your questions and thoughts on this as well, I'd like to bring up our panel. The first speaker, the first time we've been privileged enough to have him speak at any of our conferences. He came into the role at General Motors about a year ago. Calls himself a newbie in logistics, but certainly isn't a newbie in the global purchasing and supply chain space, more than 25 years with General Motors across a variety of commodities there, and now leading global logistics purchasing. Very pleased that Prashant Swadia could join us today. Prashant. Thanks for being here, Prashant. Thank you. Have a seat. Next joining us, we had a slight change in program. There was one member from Höegh who had a flight disruption. Probably should have took the shipping line, actually. That might have been more reliable. But very pleased that this executive could step in. Extensive experience across shipping and ro-ro in functions and operations, capacity planning, and very pleased to welcome Stephen Hubert, Global Key Account Manager for Höegh Autoliners. Stephen, thanks for being with us. Why don't you have a seat here at the end?
Thank you.
I'm not sure if our final speaker needs a whole lot of introduction. I feel like he's infamous as opposed to famous around these parts. No, it's great. Some of you would have known him for nearly 20 years at Honda, where he also more recently worked in the export logistics side, and for the past several years has been leading new parts of business development and growth for Govis America. Very pleased that Charles Franklin, Senior Manager Business Development, can join us today. Charles. You're not going to cause too much trouble, are you?
I'll try.
Thanks very much. Charles specifically asked to sit as far away from Stephen as possible. No, I'm joking. Now, in the spirit of partnership, I just wanted to start defining this a little bit for each of you. When we talk about long-haul, long-term partnerships, win-win partnerships, what are some of the key ways you would define that? We've tended to, maybe in our polls, maybe in the discussions, maybe it's coming out a little bit along the lines of a long-term contract. And perhaps, I'm sure that plays a part, but Prashant, starting with you, what defines for you at GM in your purchasing function a real win-win partnership with your logistics providers?
Sure. Like you said, it's long-term, and hopefully it's longer than 3 years, which everybody feels is the current contract. But it's long-term, it's win-win, and what I really mean win-win is, for both the customer and supplier partner, they're winning not only when the contract is signed, but throughout the life cycle of the contract. It's built on, foundation of trust and transparency. And it's backed by performance, right? Again, from both sides. I would say the only other thing is, what we have lived through in the past few years. It's rapidly, there is rapid innovation that's happening. There is supply chain disruption. We just talked about resiliency. So the partnership needs to be what I would say agile to manage this situation. It has to be flexible so that, depending on what comes and hits us the next day or next hour, partnership is flexible. And so it has to be a dynamic partnership. So that's what I really feel, is what long-term partnership is.
Thank you. Stephen, I'll turn to you next.
I'm going to go off on a different note. So when we, I guess, a win-win, and we talk about a partnership and transparency and all that, I guess you can draw metaphor comparisons to a home life. So that you have with your partner, your wife, your husband, your kids, to the point where hopefully your values are aligned. You work to achieve what the goals of your family are, and to go off on a little thing, and what you don't do is call your wife this morning and check in with your wife and daughter and make sure everything's okay. And she finishes the conversation by saying, "Happy 20th anniversary." So, oops. And I replied by "Happy long haul partnership," which probably wasn't the best reply, but if we can go down that road and have an understanding and open communication with what needs to be done to achieve all of those things, then absolutely.
Well,
that's a win-win for.
we did give her free access to watch this session, so. And
Prashant has
she
already
said the
offered-
papers will be here in the morning, so.
Prashant has already offered a new car for her anniversary. So.
Charles.
Well, for me, and fortunately, I guess I've sat on both sides of the fence, buyer as well as seller. The thing that I like most about the long-term relationships is that you get out of this RFP cycle and get to the business of doing what you're being paid to do, shipping the vehicles. And so rather than arguing about another 20 cents here or another lane or this or that, you get back to the business of shipping the vehicles. If you're the OEM, if you're the supplier, you get to start managing your business and supporting that. Then going back to what Steve said, the longer that relationship is, you become, to some extent, one. You know what that customer wants, and you've been there. They've communicated to you. You've had those bumps in the roads, and so you can be able to deliver this service. And the trust is there that if it's broken, that if they come to you, they're not coming to you in an attack mode. They're coming to you and say, hey, this is broken, and together we need to fix this. And there's no argument, there's no debate. It's like, okay, let's look at this and see how we fix it.
Yeah. Prashant, what are some of the steps you at GM in global purchasing, supply chain, and specifically in vehicle logistics have taken to try to meet some of these ambitions, to build that trust and transparency with your partners?
I think it starts with communicating, and it's communication both ways. So sharing, what are the business priorities, business status, business needs, future needs, and then listening suppliers, right? I mean, that's one thing that I think we have been doing more and more. And we are trying to communicate both in, I would say, large to medium groups where the message is common. And then second, I think what we're trying to do is we're going to a smaller group of supplier base and really asking them that, hey, what should GM be doing for you to work with us on a longer term that helps us grow together? So we're doing that. So we're kind of really asking supplier base, tell us what we should be doing. And then I think it's kind of layered in with individual communication with supplier base, saying, which segment, which mode, which services does it make for us to start working together, so that we build that trust and trust between each other, and hey, we are committed to grow together for a longer term. So I think I would really say it's primarily is communicating with the supplier base, and then taking it from there, the next steps.
Yeah, Charles, on the seller side of the service provider sort of side of the desk, what sharing, what information are you trying to share more of with your customers and partners to improve this?
It's interesting. Rather than share information, my position is receive it. My deal, tell me what you need. Be specific, be in regards of services, timelines, and all of those things, so I can go and see what tools I have to meet that, or be honest with you and say, you know what, I can do that one, but it's going to be expensive, or it's going to be this. Maybe we could do this one instead, but let's try to get to a service delivery that supports what you need, but I have the ability to do it. Because there are some things that are just, if I ask Steve to ship a car to the Middle East in 3 days, he's going to fail because you can't do it. And so you just have to be open and honest. This is my capability, but here's what I think we can do together to meet what your requirements are.
4 days.
Anything you'd add to that, Stephen?
Yeah, to echo what Prashant said, and communication being key. And I think a big shift in Höegh Autoliners, if we want to look at an example right now, is the real drive towards environmental sustainability, and finding and aligning ourselves with partners who share that value. Yes, we can always look at the economics involved and go back to the old transactional agreements that we had, but to really kind of move forward with value-based partnerships, and something, just as an example right now, the biggest driver in Höegh right now is environmental sustainability. So to kind of communicate that, understand our customers' desires to partnership with that is paramount.
Yeah, and you said it as a clear mission, right? I mean, to be the most sustainable
Correct.
or shipping line. So that also implies that you're almost saying to some customers, if that's not aligned with your vision, then maybe we're not the partner for every
And that's a
trade.
stance we have to be willing to,
Yeah.
to accept. And we've seen that, and I won't get into specifics, but yeah, if we meet potential partners that don't share our values, then maybe that's just a direction, then we have to go a different way. Or,
And, again, we asked the question at the beginning around the length of term. Prashant, you already indicated that you hope it's more than 3 years, at least the partnership that you engage with providers here. Let's talk a little bit about those lengths of terms. I mean, is that something you're doing more with your customers, looking over much longer horizon, shaping the agreements in this way, and what are some of the factors playing into it? I'm going to go to you again, Stephen, because that very goal and ambition is not a short-term one, so it does certainly require something of a longer view.
yeah, and actually, Charles and I were talking about this just before we came up here, and when Charles was back in Honda, we used to do one-year contracts, and we would sit and bang our heads against the wall about why, because there's no predictability, there's no partnership going forward, and when we look at what we're doing now, we have 12 new vessels on order. Some are doing water trials right now, and our goal of environmental sustainability and carbon neutral vessels and carbon zero vessels, and just our desire to be that driver, the cost of vessels and the long-term partnership that is required in that, and the economic predictability that we receive in a long-term contract allows us to leverage that with lenders and going out and purchasing new advanced environmentally friendly vessels, which is utmost important.
And Charles, maybe I'll come to you before Prashant on this. What are you explicitly signing longer agreements with your partners? Has this shifted in the industry?
Yes, exactly. And we have what we try to do we have whiteboard sessions. And the purpose of a whiteboard session is say, hey, what are you going to do over the next 10 years? Here's our plans over the next 10 years. We learn about each other and say, okay, we're almost doing the same thing. If I modify, we can support that. And then if it's an OEM partner now, like Stephen said, that puts you in the position to go back to your finance group and say, look, I've got this multi-year deal with this provider or this OEM. I need the funding to support this. But when you get a one-year deal, it's hard to ask for a few $1 million or whatever it is. And then going back on Steve's statement, we were banging our heads on 1 year, and we forged one of the first multi-year carrier agreements for Honda, and now again, you stop negotiating, you start shipping cars. The other thing I'd like to throw in there that the long-term agreements must have, and I think Prashant said this as well, you got to have flexibility. Because a lot of times we put in there, hey, I need 10 cars a month at 10 o'clock in the morning, and as he'll tell you, they just don't come out the back of the plant that way. And so every once in a while, you got to make some adjustments, and a long-term agreement gives you the ability to be flexible because you're spreading out that profit and loss over a greater period of time. When you got that 1 year, I need to make my money this year off of this agreement, otherwise I'm losing. And so if he or your partner has or the economy shifts, you don't have any recovery. And a long-term agreement gives you that ability to be flexible.
Prashant, could you walk us through any, not specific examples as such, but in terms of how you see that? I mean, is it you've explicitly extended these contract terms, but brought in particular cost basis, flexibility, or whatever? Has there been sort of changes to the mechanism of how you partner with some of your providers?
I would say we are on a journey, and we have started, right? And we have started communicating. We have started hearing that, what it would mean to be on longer term. Because, one of the challenge, as he said, love to get out of talking and negotiating those 10 cents, 5 cents every year. I think it's a waste of time. But the second part of it, which I think we all forget, is, once the cost is finalized, sometimes you have a provider A to provider B lane A goes to provider A and lane B goes to provider B. So it flips. So now you have your operations team trying to figure out how to implement this. And then when it is actually, the carrier shows up at the door, there's a confusion for the people that are actually executing the, loading of the vehicle and so on and so forth. So that's a huge waste in the system, right? So I think, one is let's start the journey. Let's talk about how we're going to do this. I think we're seeing the benefits where we have, Loan Limit entered into this long-term contract. But I think it's a journey, and it has to be a lot of discussion because we all know that, if we had, let's say somebody had signed a 5-year contract back in 2018 or 2019, nobody would have predicted 21, 22, 23, right? So I think we all need to acknowledge the fact that world is going to be dynamic. This is the new normal, and how do we structure the agreements that, like I said, you fill win-win not only when you sign the contract, but that 3, 5, 7 years ends, that time also you fill. It's a win-win partnership. So I think we're on a journey, I would say, and we're just saying how do we make sure that none of us, both the partners, don't feel that I have lost in this during the duration of the contract.
Yeah, I mean, because as you sort of alluded to, there could be changes that are just well beyond the scope of a logistics parameter, a footprint change, or facility change, or a market change. And do you see the willingness, or do you, in these early discussions, do you feel a willingness from partners to say, okay, I'm willing to put a bit of risk on the line here to say, right, in a given change, maybe it's not a one-for-one loss, but there's some room that we're going to be adjusting. This is something that you're seeing a willingness and openness from your partners.
Yes, I would say yes. I mean, once you kind of sit across the table, talk, share, the situation, and I think people probably feel a little bit, comfortable given that what we have seen in the last 3-4 years, that this is the way of life. And we just have to learn to work with it. So we're seeing that willingness to, I would say, enter into a long-term agreement with flexibility that, both of us have a room to manage in the dynamic, ever-changing world.
Yeah. And I mean, also we tend to use the word transactional partnership or relationship as a negative term, and I think we would agree for some of the goals we're trying to achieve, then it doesn't work. But if you do look in the network, I mean, to the points raised earlier today, I think when we spoke with Paul and with Lisa from Subaru, if you've had a quality hold or a situation where you need to pause and release into the system, well, you might just need something. You need to broker the services. You need top-up capacity. Maybe that is transactional. Maybe it needs to be transactional. So in a sense, you're still looking across your network to say, okay, we have to find this right balance, that here I'm going to partner on the long term, but I'm going to leave some scope to still work very flexible with a number of providers. Or is that something you think we can sort of move further away from?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think there are modes and services that will have to be transactional, whether you want to, ideally you would want it to be on longer term, but they will be transactional. But, I'll give, I can say that those transactional can also be long term, I mean, just the example you were giving that, hey, there's a quality hold and, you release suddenly and network is not ready to accept that. But hey, I have this standing 3 partners that I will call when I have it, and I'm not going to go out and try to find who those 3 or 4 partners needs to be. And that's really what I would call, it's transactional, but still a long-term partnership because then you know each other and you can work with it. But having said that, I feel that there'll be certain modes and services will remain transactional, and I don't think we should shy away from that. My experience, I've also seen that a service with a supplier A can be long-term and supplier B could be transactional, right? Or, the other example I would give is, you have a business, you need to ship 100 vehicles. You can put 60 on a long-term agreement. You can put 40 on a transactional. So it gives flexibility to both the partners. So I think, I would say it has to be appropriate. I don't think we should just say that every contract needs to be long-term. No. Appropriate partnership for appropriate modes and service.
I can almost imagine it can be this way as well on the provider side too. I mean, not every partner can be a base level GM or whatever we say. I mean, in some cases you will have opportunities on certain lanes where you want to work that way, perhaps with some customers.
And it's a necessity, as Prashant mentioned, quality hold. That's on their side. On our side, obviously, we've seen so many disruptions in the ocean, whether it's Panama, it's Red Sea, whatever. We need to have the flexibility on our side as well, and the understanding. And as Charles mentioned earlier, through a long-term contract, then we get through those ebbs and flows, those challenges. We work together to find them. But there also needs to be the flexibility that, maybe we have to work on a long-term or on the contract level, and then we have some flexibility for transactional. And I think that can be beneficial to both sides, because we have our disruptions just as much as anyone else has their disruptions. So we have to be able to work through them in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And Charles, I mean, we come back again and again to communication. You said earlier, show me what you're trying to do so that I can help. But where are examples where you're just not getting information? Clearly not from Prashant, because he's a good guy and he'll share. But what do you need more? Where are you lacking in transparency from your customers to help them serve better?
Well, some of it, and again, like I said, I sat on both sides of the fence. Some of it is, unfortunately, industry norms, because even some of the information we need, they don't have, because the production folks are not going to necessarily communicate that they got some issues with quality or part shortages and these things. So some things that we need, they don't even have to share with us. Or if they do have it, because of the sensitivity of it, they can't. And so again, with a longer term relationship, a little bit more information does flow, because they know this is a trusted provider. I know it won't be on Facebook tomorrow or whatever, and they know that sharing this information with me will help create some solutions, because our number one focus is service delivery. And if I could give you the service delivery you're looking for, I really don't have to worry about a long-term relationship, because you're going to want me anyway. And I go back to that, and even when you're talking about transactional, I think, as Prashant said, those are long-term relationships. I mean, many of the folks in this room, I haven't bought from them since I left Honda, but I guarantee you that if I called them today and said, hey, I need some support, because of the relationship, even though I don't want to sit by him, Steve's going to call me back.
I'll tell you a story about my profile picture later.
So, but again, so it is that relationship, and so even though it may appear to be transactional, but as Prashant said, that transactional person is the one I call all the time when I need that type of business.
Yeah.
So therefore, it typically is a long-term relationship.
Prashant, I mean, we tend to put this on the OEMs to some extent, but do you think, and again, not these guys, because clearly this is kumbaya up here, everybody's getting along so well, but for the other guys out there, for the bad guys, now what information are you not getting? I mean, do you think there is some hesitancy from some providers to perhaps be as transparent as they could? Because at the end of the day, their capacity is to a certain extent their pricing power, or perhaps in some cases. I mean, are there barriers in some areas you find?
I wouldn't say there are barriers. I feel that, as long as there is relationship and communication that, hey, this is the intention we have, would you be willing to share that information with us, right? Steve just mentioned that 12 ships are on its way, right? I mean, hey, that information, and here is my geographical development plan. Here is my investment into the assets, because logistics, as we all know, is an asset-based business. Or here is my service expansion plan, right? So I haven't really seen resistance to share. What I would say is I think we need to get to that proactive sharing aspect versus, if you say, hey, Charles, can we sit and can you tell me all of this? Charles would be happy to share. But hey, am I reaching out to Charles and asking that question? Right? Or am I investing in time and energy to sit with Charles and saying, hey, I need to know this? And when I do that, I think an obligation on OEM is to say, hey, this is why I'm asking this question. That, hey, we're trying to do this, and I need this. Tell me what you can do for it. So it's about, and to me, that happens naturally once you have the relationship, once you have that trust. So I wouldn't say there is hesitancy to share from the supplier side. It just needs to, OEMs or customers needs to invest in asking that question.
Well, that's a very fair point. I'm very happy for questions, comments, disagreements,
If I could
general scorn.
jump in on what Prashant
Yes, please,
said.
please do so. Whilst and put a hand up in the meantime, and we'll have someone get a mic to you. But please.
Yeah, and I'm going to get very specific here. I sat in on a call this morning, and again, we're a shipping line, so we're at the end of the line, and we have a ship coming into a port, and suddenly we get a notification of 400 cars aren't showing up. We're just like, what the hell? How did we not know this? And so we can do this all day long, and sometimes we're guilty of it. But to what we've just been talking about, the long-term relationship and the trust that's built and the transparency, which has been the a big theme of the day, it's still baffling to me how we just sit in the dark sometimes in different segments and somebody knows something. But I think through the long-term relationship or the long-term contracts and building that trust, there shouldn't be that kind of secrecy, and hopefully we're able to build on that. And I think it benefits every segment of the supply chain. So.
Yeah. I particularly like this topic on goal alignment, which Stephen certainly raised in this context. Let's say maybe sustainability, that might be one example. Prashant, maybe turning to you again, are there ways that or goals that you're sitting down with providers to sort of align on, be it improving quality, a new market entry? I'm not sure. I mean, maybe there's some examples of how you working in new ways to align goals with your provider base.
I think, the way we are approaching it, I would say, is, again, I mean, I'll keep on going back to communication and sharing and listening, because it's about, hey, this is the area we are growing or shrinking, whatever that may be, right? And I know we talked a lot about Mexico. We talk about, vehicles coming from overseas to North America. Hey, this is what direction we are going, and hey, what are you doing about it, right? And supplier A might, like Steve might say, hey, we're gonna be investing in 12 ships, so we can do that for you, for example. Or supplier B might say that, you know what, we are steady here. We're not hoping to grow in this direction, so we can't do it. So, it's important. Like, I don't want to deny that. I mean, that it's important that there's a goal alignment, which is, possibly based on existing expertise, because I think I want to make sure that, there's what I call a baseline business. So it doesn't have to be that I'm growing from 100 to 120. I need support for baseline business of 100. And what service expertise do you have to support my baseline business? We do business today, it is transactional, it is 1 year, 2 year contract. Can we enter into a longer term contract for this base services? And, sometimes it's important to understand that what's your core expertise. I think that I have sometimes, struggled because sometimes you see suppliers trying to say, I can do this 10 things for you. Right? And I would rather hear, okay, these are the 2 things that I am best at, And I would rather do those two first, and then let's talk about the third and fourth and fifth. So I think that aspect to me is very critical, that if you have the right discussion and focus on core strength, because then what happens is, one, the supplier will be competitive not only in terms of cost, but also in terms of actual execution of the business. And then, once you perform the business at the right cost, it says, you know what, we can develop and be a long-term partner, and now let's see if we can grow beyond just one mode or one service.
Yeah.
So I would say that discussion and that alignment is very critical, and versus trying to just say, hey, I can do this 10 things for you.
Yeah, but and it's a great point, and I think that if you have a platform where you're able to share, hey, I have this issue on the West Coast or whatever it might be, my network has changed, can you help me here? It's probably a lot more fruitful way to work with a partner than fill in everything.
Yeah.
Do we have any comments or questions from the audience? And apologies, it's slightly, right in the front here.
Hi,
The young
Kristen,
woman.
Yes, hi, Kristen Dekas with the Port of Wanimi, and I'm hoping, Stephen, that wasn't your port where you ran into that situation with the 400 cars. Oh, good. A little bit off topic, but I think also in the spirit of partnerships and being in the state of California, I'm just curious from a carrier and also an OEM perspective, we have big mandates in queue. One is, the ocean carriers are going to have to be zero emission at berth come January 1st, 2025, and then also our governor has a mandate of 100% new light vehicle sales being EV by 2035, and just curious your take on that, and as a port, enjoy the partnership that I have with all of you on the stage.
Do you want to start on the port side, Stephen?
We don't know California.
You don't?
You talked about like alternative fuels, and I'm just curious, like, would you consider electrifying your vessels so you can plug in at berth and those sorts of things?
Yeah, sorry, I'm stalling here. Our 12 vessels that are on order right now are multi-fuel vessels. Anything that is beneficial to make or going to make our industry greener is open for discussion, 1,000%. So, as I've mentioned from the beginning, Höegh's ultimate goal and driver in all of this is environmental sustainability. So, however we can best achieve that is always an open discussion. Does that help without getting into specifics?
Because there's different ways to go into compliance. I'm sure Govis on the stage, Charles, you know this too, looking at, there's different technologies in the pipeline, and these regulations are coming pretty fast and quickly to California, so I just wanted your take on that in terms of how you would meet that mandate come in January.
Charles, anything? I mean, we talked last year, I think we were talking about hydrogen trucks, which obviously were coming in. I mean, are there any other points from a Govis point of view that you're looking at to accelerate in regards to these specific regulations?
Well, as you said, right now we do have a partnership with the state of California where we have hydrogen vehicles up in NorCal, where we're running a project trying to see how these will support the government's initiatives. But at the same time, going back to that service delivery, and I was talking to a gentleman in the hall just a while ago. He has enclosed trailers. So, and I said, well, how much does your rig weigh without any freight? And he says it's 47,000 pounds. And so for those of you that don't know, max load weight for a big rig or auto hauler is 80,000 pounds. So that's only leaving him 33,000 pounds in the new EV SUVs, and so our government is saying all of these EVs are 7,000 pounds. Okay, so if you do all green, now you've gone from a 7 to, in some cases, 9 load to 4 cars on this truck. So what does that do? Now it's going to take 2 to 3 times more trucks to ship the same number of cars. So are you really being more efficient? And then I won't say where we were. We've been to some facilities where they had diesel-powered chargers. So, okay, so what I'm saying is Govis is working. We got the hydrogen vehicles. We are working. Our main customers produce EV vehicles, which we move. But I think in addition to the government mandates, there needs to be an evaluation of how these are actually going to impact the consumer. Because right now, most of these trucks will not be hydrogen. So that same truck, that's a diesel truck. So now instead of having one diesel truck taking these cars, you're going to have 3 or 4. So the traffic's going to be worse. The emissions are going to be worse. So I don't have the answer, but I was looking forward. We had actually invited the California Secretary of Transportation to our vehicle conference because that was the questions that some of myself and some of our partners wanted to see is how are we going to manage these initiatives when they come into play, because they're going to have a negative impact immediately, maybe in the long term to be worked out. So I don't have the answers. If so, I'd be out on one of those boats you saw earlier, but I don't have the answer.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you raised it because tomorrow morning, Christine Casey, who's the Deputy Secretary for Freight Policy for the California State Transportation Agency, CalSTA, is speaking as our keynote speaker 9 a.m. tomorrow. So come ready, loaded with questions. I think Christine is actually already here, so perhaps there's even some sneak previews that can be there. But we definitely want to go on those specific topics and share more about what the state is planning, what kind of policies, initiatives, funding is there, and also recognizing certainly some of the points that Charles raised. I didn't mean to cut off though, if Prashant, if you did, I don't know if you had any comments that you would further add to that.
No, nothing to add.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, this question is for Prashant. This is Srini from Agilence. I have 2 questions. First question is relating, morning we heard from Ford that they are having a supplier portal in which they want to share the inventory so that all the participants in the network, with the yards, whatever, in transit and things like that, so that the transportation providers can plan their activities better. So is there any kind of that kind of initiatives in GM? That's the first question. The second question is most of the OEMs I see the production parts and the service parts, they work like 2 silos. They don't have there are 2 trucks going to the same supplier to pick up. So is there any initiatives in GM to combine those parts, logistics into one group?
So we do have a supplier portal. I don't know if everything that needs to be there is there, so we're working towards that journey. But we do have a supplier-facing portal. We call it Supply Power. On your second question, I think yes, the best part is the total logistics that we have in GM, whether it is for finished vehicle, for parts coming into the plant, and parts that come in or go out for after sales or services. All of that is under one umbrella. And my boss has responsibility for all of that. And I have responsibility for purchasing for all of those services, for example. And I have partners who manage planning, engineering, and operations. But all of us report to one single leader. So I would say, yes, we're really working in terms of synergies that we can get, avoiding number of same 2 different trucks going to a same supplier. But it sometimes happens because one is heading to a plant and one is heading to a dealer. So there might be 2 trucks going to a same supplier to pick up parts, but for different purposes. But can that be from a same supplier? So that it's much easier, so that half of it could go under a single truck and then it gets split. Yes, we continue to work on that.
Thank you, Prashant. Maybe a question, I raised the question this morning to Paul from Ford in terms of are there areas of your logistics that you've looked where perhaps vertical integration or building up some fleets and having some own dedicated capacity, be it chartered or owned, might might play a role or might be interesting? Is that something that has been on the table for GM as well?
I mean, I would not say yes or no. I think it's, as I think you probably gave example that, when the crisis came,
Yes.
and I think we did some of that too, I would say dedicated, chartered, so on and so forth. But again, I totally agree with your comment that you said in the bonding that it would create inefficiencies, right? I mean, we could have a ship moving parts from, let's say, here, Asia to North America, but then what do we do when it has to go back? So I would rather have Steve manage that for me rather than, us managing that.
Yeah.
But we did some of it, and I would say, that might be a good solution temporarily or need of the hour, and that's fine. But I don't think that's a long-term sustainable solution. I think we believe in the expertise of the supplier partners, and they know how to do this best, much better than us. We are in the business of building cars and selling cars for our customers. So
Yeah. And Charles and Stephen, I mean, is there enough room for trial and innovation in this space? I mean, again, we raised earlier the hydrogen truck example. We've seen examples of electric trucks. But, it's not an industry with super high margin. There's little room for error. I mean, do you see more space, or how do you find space to really innovate, try, even fail, so that you can sort of get better? Is that something you think you're working better with your OEMs on to achieve?
Absolutely. One of the things that I like about working at Govis, and this is truly not a sales pitch, we are extremely flexible and extremely innovative. So again, I'm going to ask Prashant, what do you want to do? And he's going to tell me what he wants to do, and I'm going to go back and I say, hey, this is what he wants to do. How do we do this? And we bang it around, and we'll bring it back to him, and we'll hear what he says, and then we look around, and we try to find a solution. So, and you have to have that flexibility. And I mean, to give you an idea, how many people in this room knew that Govis had a fuel business? And that's because one of our employees had an idea that we could buy and sell gasoline, and we tried it. And we recently just sold that off. So we have absolutely that possibility. It's just tell us what you want to do, let's talk about it, and if it looks like something we can implement, let's give it a go. And if it doesn't work, we move on.
Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the benefits, as people that know the seaside and the ro-ro carriers, we're a little bit smaller. We've really prided ourselves on our ability to be more flexible, and therefore, when you have people like Sean and going back to him and saying exactly what do you need, much like Charles just alluded to, let's throw it against the wall. Let's see what sticks, and hopefully it works in our favor as well. And we have to, with all the changes that have been going on, and we see the change in manufacturing plants moving around, we have to be flexible, and therefore willing to try and discuss anything.
So maybe I'll let one more audience question or comment, if there is one. I mean, I know I got you all thinking about that cocktail hour, so I probably, undid it myself. Off he goes. Just one more question from my side, because I think it is a key point and has been certainly one of the pillars of GM's GPSC, your leadership, Prashant, in terms of being a customer of choice in the industry. And I'm interested in to the extent that that remains a strategy or is a strategy for vehicle logistics, are there things that you're doing to emphasize or let's say, be seen more as a customer of choice in vehicle logistics?
absolutely. I think it starts at vision that GM has, then the global purchasing and supply chain has, and what vehicle logistics or logistics as a whole has. And we want to be customer of choice for suppliers because we want to get the best and brightest ideas come to us. We want the best and brightest people to work on projects for GM. And that you can only do if you are the customer of choice, right? Because we understand totally that suppliers have a choice to go to any other OEMs, and we want those best ideas and best people to come to us. And I think, one of the things that, I kind of talked about a little bit what we've been doing is, one is, I would say, accessible leadership. I think, me and Christina are here representing Renee from GM side, and then, we are accessible to the supplier base. I think that, to me, is the most important that you're talking. And second thing, I think, like I talked about, we are, communicating in larger group, smaller group. We are talking to all logistics suppliers and sharing, hey, this is the vision we have as GM Logistics. So we have done that, saying, hey, so that, we hear the ideas that how can you help us, into this vision. But it's not only about sharing, it's about listening to the suppliers, right? Saying, the whiteboarding session, love that. We have been doing quite a few whiteboarding sessions with our suppliers that tell us how can we solve this together, right? And then, but I would also emphasize that, there is a huge focus on performance, both internally and externally, right? So my boss and I, we all hold accountability to performance, and that's what we're expecting from suppliers, and suppliers to hold us accountable. And so that we get the best industry-leading services. And I think the last one is, try to make sure that we are entering, and the topic of this is, entering into a strategic partnership with our suppliers. So we are seeking and offering strategic partnership, and hopefully, that kind of ensures that we continue to remain customer of choice and stay ahead.
I think that's a great message for us to be closing the session on. I will just give, if Stephen or Charles, do you have any other words you'd add in terms of, what you'd need to see or what you'd like to see to, from a customer of choice, to ensure these are actions as well as words as an ambition. Is there anything else you'd really like to see?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes full circle to what we started with, or what we said from our side in terms of aligning our values and openly communicating what they are. And for, as I mentioned, one example, or our most example, is environmental sustainability and making this a greener industry, and those partners that align with our values, and hopefully we see eye to eye, and the overarching values, and those are definitely customers of choice and people that we want to be aligned with. So,
absolutely. Charles.
And just going back to the basic, the communication, and any of my team members will tell, and when I go on a sales call, I limit my introduction personally to 5 minutes, because I didn't come to meet with Prashant to listen to me. I want to, hey, I'm here, here's a couple of things I'm doing, but I really want you to tell me what you need. And we were just talking about, and I remember almost everything they tell me. And then it makes it easy, because if I bring him back exactly what he asked for, it's not even selling. He said, I want apple pie. I said, apple pie. It's sold. And so then I'm meeting his requirements, and I'm helping him meet his boss's requirements, because I'm giving him exactly what. So when I do the communication, I want to know. And even if what you have to tell me might not be good about the service or me or my company, tell me, so that I can bring it back and try to fix it. So communicate.
Coming right back down full circle on that. Well, I think we'll end it there, and we'll take the rest of that into the evening and further networking discussion. But thank you so much, Prashant, Stephen, and Charles, for sharing with us and joining me on stage here today. Thank you very much.